joining us for Powering Virginia. I'm your host, Jessica Nall. The health of the bay starts further upstream, in our yards, and as it turns out, even on our dinner plate.
Traditionally, stormwater, the way we've managed that for public safety and for a variety of reasons is get rid of it as fast as we can. You want to get it off of the roadways, you want to get it out of parking lots and sidewalks because people don't want to be driving in it, they don't want to be walking through it. But that means that it's going directly into water bodies, into lakes and streams, and eventually into the Chesapeake Bay without being filtered at all, without being cleaned at all.
How can we help and how expensive would it be? We'll show you a program offering up to 75% of the cost to make improvements around your property that make a big splash with the overall health of the bay. Plus, we'll dig into a no-cost project helping you get a great-looking landscape, yard, or garden for less out of pocket while managing to reduce the impact on rivers, oceans, and lakes around the Commonwealth. Plus, we're headed to the Piankatank River, planting baby oysters using old recycled oyster shells. All that and more coming up on Powering Virginia.
Now, a year ago, this was a long, sloping mud pit of death. It was just rivulets of mud coming from the street and polluting the lake.
So the homeowner, Sandy, was having real trouble, as many in the Richmond region do, with standing water, with water rushing off during a storm event. There would be stormwater runoff and it was taking away her mulch, it was taking away her soil, it was muddy in parts of her yard and flooded in other parts.
There's a long distance from the road in front of her house down to the lake back here where that water can pick up a lot of speed, and if you don't do anything to slow it down, it takes a lot of sediment with it, you have a lot of erosion issues, and she was seeing that here. She's shown us photographs during a rainstorm where there are these huge sediment plumes in the lake where all that dirt is going straight into the lake, being carried downstream.
But, as luck would have it, homeowner Sandy Bailey discovered a way to change the outcome.
It was a wonderful confluence of two things happening. I joined the Master Naturalist program, and so that made me aware even more of all the bad things that were happening from my yard, which feeds eventually into the Chesapeake. And then at the Master Naturalist program, they told me about VCAP.
The Virginia Conservation Assistance Program is a program designed to provide cost share to homeowners and businesses across most of Virginia throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And it's to help people pay for landscaping projects that will prevent runoff.
Our goal being to reduce the amount of sediment and nutrients going into the bay, therefore cleaning up water quality. And we do that by helping individual homeowners or schools, churches, groups like that to install green infrastructure, stormwater controls on their property. We help them pay for it and we guide them through the process.
We were able to qualify for everything from dry wells, which are big enough for me to sit in to mitigate the runoff. And then we have a riparian border down by the water, and then changing turf to natives. It's conservation landscaping, so taking out the pathetic excuse for turf that we had and putting native plants in.
She's got rain gardens, conservation landscaping, dry wells, just a whole variety of practices that have completely changed the quality of the water that's coming off of her property.
It's really beneficial for the homeowner and they get a lot out of it. It looks so beautiful and it solves so many of their problems and it saves them money.
Typically people don't call looking for funding or to say I want to help clean up the Chesapeake Bay. They say I've got some spot in my yard that's always muddy or some area where the soil's eroding, what do I do? And they're really surprised when we come out and we'll actually help guide them through the process. We'll help connect them with people that can solve the problem for them, and then we'll pay back part of the project too in the end.
So what this did is look at the flow of the water and then design appropriate systems so that to catch the water, to slow the water, and to direct it so it can slowly sink in. And it's really turned out beautifully.
If you live on a slope, you can't let your slope disappear every time there's a rainstorm. The trees can only do so much to hold the bank in. And so it was absolutely rescuing the house. And it is an investment that brings beauty to my yard. It brings birds, it brings butterflies, it brings otters. And so that's a value that if I ever chose to sell the house, it's a National Wildlife Center.
She was recognized through our program as an award winner because she has done so many practices here that she has completely transformed the landscape here. This was so much just exposed dirt, erosion issues, and now it's these beautiful gardens.
I used to be a gardener that wanted things to look good, and I didn't really think about the consequences. And what this program helps you do is says, you know, there are consequences to all the choices you make, the fertilizers, whatever, and we don't want to do any harm.
For more about this program, visit WTVR.com/Powering Virginia for a direct link.
Coming up next on Powering Virginia, what's your yard really craving? Spend less discovering how the luscious landscape could be yours for next to nothing. It's a setting many of us are familiar with, tackling that yard. There's a great way to do it that's also cost effective. Lindy Durham is an education specialist with Henricropolis, and there's a program called soil testing. What is this all about, Lindy?
Our involvement with soil testing is to pretty much protect the waterways. Not very many people know that if you over-fertilize, the extra fertilizer washes off your lawn with the rain. Ends up going down storm drains and into the waterways. So we want to help Henrico citizens save money so they don't buy too much fertilizer and protect the watershed at the same time.
Well said. It's hard to believe that protection starts in the yard. How does it work? What do you do?
Citizens will request a soil test kit, either from the Extension Office or the public libraries. And this little coupon here tells them that Henricropolis will give them 2 vouchers per address every year to pay for those soil tests. So it's really free for the citizen.
Wow. Couldn't be easier than that, but now we're actually going to put it to the test and do some testing. Thanks for the explainer, Lindy.
My pleasure.
Well, Lindy told us what it was all about. Now Stacy Heflin's part of the team, and she's going to show us how it's done. Stacy, this is a program where you pick up the voucher, you get these elements. What else should we be expecting?
Trying to establish these bare spots. So I'm going to pick on my soil kit what I'm about to test.
So this gives an explanation of necessarily how to do it and what type of project you're working on, because I guess you could either have bare patches or if you were planting a vegetable garden,
right,
different needs.
Yep, that's correct. So gardens, we can do shrubs, fruits, but right now we're going to test for maintaining grass and bare spots.
Okay. So what do we do?
So we've got our kit set up, and our instructions are pretty easy to follow right here on the back of the sheets. And the first step is to find a spot, make sure that the soil is dry and not super moist. And we're going to dig about 4 inches.
And you've got a nice trowel there with
Yes,
actual measurements on it, which makes it pretty handy.
Yes, according to the kit, it needs to be about 4 inches. And I've pushed the soil away. And that's where I'm going to take a sliver of about 2 inches wide. Put it into my bucket. I'm going to do this 4 other spots.
So 4 different spots around
Yes,
your yard.
So about 5 spots where you're testing like the front yard or an area of the garden. If you're trying to plant a garden, we'll do the same thing, and we'll get it in a 5-gallon bucket and just mix it, and then we'll take a good representation.
And load up your box.
That's correct. And then we just send this off with the vouchers and the instructions that came with the kit. And we should get the results in a few weeks, usually by email. And the results will tell us what we need to do to adjust the soil, for example. If we're doing the garden, how much lime or fertilizer to put down. In this case, what we would do to increase grass for these bare spots.
Terrific. Pretty easy. Stacy doesn't come do the heavy lifting for you, by the way. You have to do that on your own, but it couldn't be any easier than that. Coming up, have you ever heard of spat seeding or using old shells to build a bed? Take a trip with us on the Piankatank River. It's part of a journey to help the Chesapeake Bay. chuck that shuck. That's the mantra that brought us together a few years ago. This is Todd Janeski. He developed the Virginia Oyster Shell Recycling Program. It's a project of the VCU Rice Rivers Center. Fast forward today, Todd, we're back. I'm gonna get my hands dirty.
Yeah, great.
What do we have going on?
Yes, so today what we're doing is we're planting shell that we have recycled. This shell has been seeded with larval oysters. So for an oyster's first 2-3 weeks of their life, they're a free swimming animal. And what we do is we introduce them into a large tank that we're emptying right now that's full of these bags of shell. Those larvae oysters are seeking this hard surface to attach to. And as we look on these bags, we can actually see, like here, for example, here's one baby oyster attached to that shell there. We've been counting them.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing as many as 34 strike, is what it's called, per shell. And so what we're doing is we're taking these bags, we're emptying them into baskets, and we're putting them on a reef in the Pianka tank.
All right, we're gonna get hands-on today and make that happen. This is that preferred substrate. That's why he's asking everybody not to get rid of the oyster shell, because this is supreme. This is like gold.
This absolutely is. I mean, you can't, because the industry has said, no, this is way too important, and they're actually stopping that redirection of that this material so that it goes back in the bay as part of natural shell production, just to build a hardened reef, or like what we're doing, which is to put the baby oysters on there and then put them back out.
So Todd, the spat that were in the tank, how quickly did they end up setting?
So those spat, once we put them in the tank, those larvae, when they go in and they become spat once they strike, that's about 2 to 3 days.
So it's pretty quick.
It is pretty quick. These oysters live on the bottom. They get tumbled around, they get beat up. You know, they're preyed on by crab. There's a home for all sorts of finfish around there, and so they're kind of getting stirred up, and as they're growing, they're knitting together into that oyster reef.
And in doing something like this, they'll be building that oyster reef. We've talked before about what impact does that have?
Oh, it's a huge impact. I mean, oysters have a lot of ecosystem services. They're filterers, and so they're removing material from the water column. But as they grow and they're filtering, they're helping that water quality around there. But they are, as I was mentioning before, they provide this home for crabs, for striped bass, for speckled sea trout. Matter of fact, VCU just finished some research recently and found 31 species of fish that utilize oyster reefs at some life stage.
How big will this particular project be, and how often are you doing these?
Yeah, so this project, we're putting out about 450 bushels this week. We'll probably do that another 2 times this year. We seeded one of the 2 tanks on site with 8 million oysters. Next time, if we can do it, we'll seed both tanks and we'll put 16 to 20 million oysters on those. You can step up in that little gap right there. It'll be easy. And I'll come over here and just kind of come over and just take it right out. Yep, empty it out.
So 1 bucket at a time of restoration, Todd. Why? This used to be a huge industry for Virginia.
Sure.
What changed?
Well, a lot of things really kind of impacted the oyster industry. Post World War II, we saw a huge development boom in the Chesapeake Bay. We saw homes, pop up where there were farm fields and forests. That really changed how runoff took place and went from people's yards into the streams and ultimately the rivers and bay. And water quality declined. At the same time period around then, we started seeing a new influx of watermen from the Northeast come down and harvest the Chesapeake Bay for oysters. That combined pressure on a stressed population because of water quality issues was made those oysters really susceptible to things like disease. We saw a couple that really affected it not long after in the 50s or the 70s. And so, culmination of poor water quality, over-harvesting, disease, really wiped us out. We hit an all-time low around 2003, where there virtually were no oysters being harvested.
You've got so much coming in here. All of these were done, more to come, but how long will it take to set? Kind of do its thing?
Well, pretty much as soon as they're in there, they're already doing their thing. They're growing, they're feeding, by putting that hard substrate down, fish will start to use this habitat. So immediately by just returning the shell alone, but the fact that we're putting spout on shell back as well, we're putting animals back in the system.
Yeah.
So you've got the combination of the hard structure that the fish will use, more oysters can grow on. The water temps are rising right now, so the wild spawn will start taking place. So now we're providing a substrate for them to attach, and these babies that we put out there that are 2-3 weeks old now are already got a head start on the ones that are going to be growing behind them. So yeah, it's immediate, it really is.
Great work from the Virginia Oyster Shell Recycling Program here on the Pianka Tank. Thanks, Todd.
Oh, thanks for coming out. Really appreciate you guys coming to join us today.
For more about this program, visit WTVR.com/poweringvirginia for a direct link.
Thanks for watching Powering Virginia. To enjoy these ideas again and to learn more, visit WTVR.com/poweringvirginia. I'm your host, Jessica Null. Until next time.